So I guess first order of business is your brushes. Everybody has your brushes. So ideally, right, what we're looking for is something about this size, okay? So that we can have a good grip to it with our fingers. If we do something smaller than that, and if you have one of these, it's okay, but you won't. It's obviously it's gonna write a lot smaller, so you won't have that sort of kind of a good gravity grip on these little ones, right? This is more like if you're sitting at a table, and this is more for like how we do it on the floor. Okay. Christy, seems like you got yours. Yeah, so that's good. So that's ideally. You can still use a regular size brush, but ideally you want to eventually get a bigger one. Okay. So if your brush is brand new, like Christie's are, there is the bristles are not going to be loose like this right now. They're very stiff, and that's because there's a coat of wax around the bristles, and that's made to protect it. Even if you have a little one too, like in the beginning, they're going to be there's going to have that coat of wax. So it's going to be hard. There's a couple of ways that you can remove that. For the bigger brush, you may need a little bit of running water, but for the small brush, all you have to do is start at the tip and start like bending it until all that wax kind of comes off, and then the whole bristles are loose. Okay, so with the bigger brush, I mean, you might need, like I said, you might need a little help with a little bit of water because they're so big, but eventually you can start like very gently massaging the bristles on these, and you start to hear it like crackling, like the wax will start to come off. Then you give it a quick rinse, and it should be all set. It's never gonna go back to that shape again, which is fine. That's only when they're brand new that has that wax shape. Were you able to do it, Christy, with yours? On that one, on the small one?
With the small one, not with this one.
Yeah. So if you're gonna do that, what you want to do is just maybe have like on a sink or something under cold running water, and then put it on the palm of your hand while it's running the water, and start pressing it slowly until it starts to give in, and then eventually you can start grabbing it, and then use the water to like help you release that wax. Okay, and then once it's all set, then it should be good to go. Okay. So a couple of things about preparing your brush when you're ready to write. So you want to always have it moistened before you ink it. So once you let's say it's not brand new anymore, you already release the bristles or whatnot, and if you hang it to dry, then when you're going to use it, you want to make sure you dip it in water, in cold water first, and moisten the bristles, and then like release all that extra water, right? So it just moisten. It should not be soaking wet because it'll dilute your ink if it's too wet. So just squeeze it until it's all the water has squeezed out. I usually take paper or something and like wrap it up a little paper so it's moistened, and then you can go ahead and ink it. Okay, that'll make it really easier. It'll be easier to clean later if you do that. If you don't, you can certainly go dry it and ink it, but there's a lot of hairs in here, and especially the center of the brush, like the heart here. All that ink is going to get absorbed all the way to the center of it, and it's going to take a lot longer to clean it if it wasn't moistened first. When it's moistened, it's just a little easier to clean. And you want to clean it every time after you use it, because the ink will dry in the bristles, especially in the center of it, and then eventually it will start to get too hard, and then it'll damage the bristles. So you do want to clean it after every use. If you if you're going to have, if you need to take a break for whatever reason, for like, I would say longer than a half hour, you can wrap it in plastic wrap and come back if you need to use it. Like you do when you paint a room, you wrap it in plastic wrap and keep going later, that'll be fine. But if you leave it on cover, the ink will start to dry it out, and then it'll damage the hair. So it's important to get in the habit of cleaning it after every use. So when you ink it, you probably should be using a big tub. Let me get mine real quick. So a bowl or something where it's big enough that you can dip it in especially this size. Okay. If it's too shallow, then you're gonna be only doing the tip, or you're gonna start putting it sideways to try to get the whole bristle, and might make a mess. So for this bowl, I usually fill it about halfway of ink, and then I'm able to like dip it, and then on the bottom of the bowl I can tap it gently to make sure that it's absorbing the ink. And then you want to like squeeze extra ink off the bowl. When we do our calligraphy, right, we take a deep breath, we raise the brush higher up. When you do that, you don't want to be spreading ink all over the place. So you want to make sure that when you finish inking, if you go like this and keep it there for like a second, or you tap it, no drip is coming off. So if you grab it like this and it's like dripping still, like when you raise that, you're gonna have like ink drops all over the place. Sumi ink is water soluble, so you don't have to worry too much if you get on your clothes, or if it gets on the rug, like it cleans up, but it can make a mess if we're not careful. So because you're submerging the brush into the ink like bunch of times, when you that's why when you clean it, there's a couple of ways to do it. My preferred method, and this is mostly to save a little bit of water, because it's gonna take, especially the big ones, gonna take quite a bit of water to clean them out. And you don't want to just have like running water, just rinsing it over running water. That seems kind of wasteful. So I like to fill like a 2-quart or maybe a half a gallon bucket, fill it up with water, and then you dip the brush in it. And then you sort of kind of go like this, up and down. And what that does, inside the water, the bristles are opening, and then the water is going into the core, right? And then you go like up and down, and you raise it up, and you see how it drips. And then at first, it's gonna turn that water black like in instantly. So you do it a couple of times, even the water's black, just to let it like clean up, and then you change the water and you put new water again, and you do it again, and you're gonna do that until that water doesn't turn black anymore. And that's when you know that it has, like all the Sumi ink right from the core has completely come off. And that's important, because you really want to make sure that those bristles are cleaned well. So for a size like this, and if you moisten it before you started it, which makes it easy to clean, for this size brush like this, I probably change the water like 2-3 times, okay? Which is not, it's not too bad. So, and I do rinse it, even though the water is black. I still rinse it a couple times on it, because it's still getting ink out, even though the water turned black. But you know how the water in the center is still black when you see it dripping. So you dip it in the water, and then you lift it up, and you see the drips. If those drips are coming really black, there's still a lot of ink in that brush. You dump the water, new water, and you'll see it'll turn black, then gray, dark gray, then light gray, until it's like, the water just barely turns. You're never gonna get it 100%. So if it's like, you're like, I've been here forever and it's still light gray, I mean, it's fine. It's just like, it's just still want to make sure you get at least about 90% of the ink clean. And so once you get it cleaned up, I like to reshape it so it's back onto the point. So I just sort of kind of gently reshape it, and then you hang it upside down. So put a nail somewhere or a hook or whatever, and then hang it. However, it's still gonna drip, so put it somewhere like over a sink, or put a container under it to catch whatever might drip during overnight. And always store it hanging upside down. If you store it hanging upside up, this is what's gonna happen. Okay, like eventually the hairs will get all crazy like that. Okay, because it's and then after that, this brush is like I consider it halfway damaged, because once this starts to do this, with the hairs are starting to curl back that way, it seems like never wanted to go back to shape. So that's why you always want to hang him upside down, so that the gravity keeps the hairs pointing downwards for the most part, especially when they're big. If you guys got the brush that I sent the link, those are 100% animal hairs. So never wash them with hot water. Always wash them with cold running water. Some brushes, the least expensive ones, will have a mix, may have some mixture of synthetic hair for strength. It just gives the brush a little strength when they use synthetic hairs. But the ones that I gave on the link, it's animal hair. So always washing with cold water, not hot water. I never soap, just in case, right? Don't put any soap on it. It's just plain water and cold water. What else? Any questions about that? Setting it up, inking, cleaning. Okay, so once you if you have a bottle of ink, right? That's your like clean source. That's your fresh ink, right? So when I put it in the bowl and I use it, I try not to put it back in that bottle. All right, so that stays like on a separate, I call it used ink. And then if I leave it here, because I know I'm doing a few days to get in a row, I'll just wrap this bowl and I just leave it in here. And I do the same with a small bowl. But if I'm not going to use it, then I have like a quart container, something that I put it on, and that's like my used ink. I try not to put it back into the clean ink, so to speak. And that's because even though the two reasons for that. One is you still dilute the ink a little bit anyways when you add a wet brush into it. So you still dilute just a little bit. You don't want to put that in your clean bottle. And second of all is that the ink in the bowl, it still dries out anyways. So it changes the consistency once you take it out of the bottle. So I try not to put it back. So I kind of keep one container that's like my used one, and I use it until I run out. And then when I new one, then I grab the bottle and I start again fresh new. But other than that, I know that sometimes at Sesshin we use a diluted ink when we practice, but when we do the final piece, we use like 100% ink viscosity. I personally don't do that myself. I mean, I just use the ink without diluting it for everything, practice or not practice. I just feel like I want to practice with the viscosity of the ink at all times. I don't want to have to like adjust when the ink is diluted, because it's going to act differently. The pressure is going to be different. It's going to absorb on the paper differently when it's diluted versus when it's not. So I don't do that personally, the diluting the ink separately and use that for practice versus the real piece, so to speak.
Do you ever use things like this?
Yeah, so that's an inkstone. Realistically, the reason you would use an inkstone is because you're grinding ink on the stone. So Sumi ink comes in sticks like this. Okay, Sumi ink comes in sticks like this. So you would take the I don't have one right now, but you put that in the stone. There's a little bit of pool of water That's all you, there's a little pool. That's where you add the water. And then just a little bit though. And then you put a little bit of water also on the bed. And then you start grinding the stick into the bed and pushing it into the pool once it turns into ink. That is a rather laborious process that you're more than welcome to play with it, but you got to add another 45 minutes to your time just to do ink. But it's a good primer. I mean, it does get you in a good state of mind. Spend 45 minutes, grinding ink and getting it to the right consistency and then the right amount. But when we do this brush, I mean, that would require so much grinding that it's not really practical for like half hour every night. So you have to use bottled ink. But that's the real reason of the stone, is that it's to grind the ink, but you can use it just as a bowl. And then the benefit of the stone is that you have the bed to like clean up your brush and make sure that you take off the excess. Like on a bowl, you kind of have to do it on the side of the bowl. But if you're gonna use a big brush, you will need a big stone because you need a pool that's gonna be deep enough to dip this brush. So I use this, but I don't have it right now because I actually have it at the dojo. But I actually use at the dojo a little small paint bucket that has the side slope for like cleaning the brush. Works perfectly for that because it's deep enough for a big brush, and you have the little slope side to clean it up. And then it's like it holds enough ink, and it's easy to clean. So that's the one that I use. It's like I'm at the hardware store. It's like a little small ink bucket, paint bucket. So, but if you're using small brushes like this one, then those ink stones are deep enough, so you can do that, or just like a little dish works too. In terms of materials, obviously paper. Okay, it's advisable to put something under it, preferably a felt cloth under the paper. So you can get that at, I don't know, any fabric store, and just buy them by the yard and cut it to like the size that you use in your area. And the felt is going to give like a cushion for the paper and the brush, and it's gonna have the right feel to it. It's not gonna feel right if you just write on top, like on the floor, or like on a carpet or a rock or something. And the felt is gonna absorb the extra ink. Sometimes even newspaper is pretty forgiving, but sometimes other types of paper, it may bleed to the other side, and then you might see stains, especially rice paper. Some rice paper will bleed to the other side, and then if you don't put anything under it, you might get some stains. But a piece of black felt, obviously, it's better because the ink is black, so you won't be able to see any of the stains, and you get that nice cushion for the brush. So a piece of felt and paperweight, something to hold the paper down. Rocks, like heavy rocks, a stone, a dish, something heavy that you can hold the paper down, so that when you're writing, it doesn't, because the brush might catch the paper and then take it with it. So you got to hold it down with some paperweights. So if you're doing something big, then rocks works well, or a piece of solid wood if it's dense and heavy, right? It has to be heavy enough to hold the paper. So I don't have it here, but I have like this, pieces of stone that are like this long, and then you probably need about 2 minimum. When we do the straight line, right? When we do the straight line, we draw that line from left to right. You want to have 2, one on each corner to hold the paper, and you're actually holding the paper with your hand too. So you're holding the paper with your hand, and then you're drawing that line from left to right, but you need the paper stone on the other two corners. And then when you're writing a character, then you want the papers on the top, holding the top two corners, and then you hold the paper down with your hand on the bottom, and then you can write. So that way it doesn't make your paper move around. So those about materials: the brush, the sumi ink, felt for under the paper, and paperweights to hold it down. And then for paper, newsprint, newspapers, that's usually our go-to. But the problem is that newspapers are not that easy to come by anymore. You know, it's like, it can get expensive if you want to start using newspaper on a daily basis, because it's not available. And then the newspapers are expensive, and they come this thing now. They're not like the big newspaper that they used to be. So newsprint, if you can get a notebook of newsprint, like those big sketch notebooks that is made of newsprint, that works pretty good. I've used that in the past. Newsprint rolls are also pretty good, because you can cut it to the size that you want. I would stay away from just regular sketch paper, drawing paper. Those have a coating, and it makes it too slippery, and the ink doesn't absorb, and it just makes a pool, and it just like it'll dry. It'll take a long time to dry. So newspaper acts the closest to rice paper in terms of ink absorption. So that's kind of like what is always like the go-to, is to do newspapers or newsprint, you know, one of those. Is that something that you guys can acquire? Newsprint, newspaper, that kind of stuff? All right, good. I actually, my old boss used to have a newspaper subscription, and I used to pick him up from his house. So I have a pretty good stack for now, but I don't know what I'm gonna do afterwards, because he passed away a couple years ago. So I don't have that source anymore. So I'm still going from that stack of newspapers. So let's see. That's pretty much it. Anybody else has a question? Yeah, I was gonna say, just get a big paintbrush. That way you will be able to work on the form and the posture, and you don't have to worry so much about whether it's looking good or not, right? Not have to worry about that. But at least you can do the, you can do the breathing, you can do the form, and work with that, and then have something heavy to, not heavy, but something big to hold and be able to have that sensation. So yeah, at the hardware store, they have those round paintbrushes, and they're not big enough. Just get the flat one. Doesn't matter. I mean, just something that's this is about 12 inches. Okay, 12 inches from head to toe. So something around that size. I mean, Christy looks bigger than mine, so hers might be a little bit fatter at the core here, which is nicer. So you got something really to grab on. So if you get something like that for now, and then you can still use sumi ink. It's not gonna damage the brush. Plus, it's a hardware store brush. Who cares? But you can still use it to be able to like raise it, and and just do the line and put your breath into it, and it doesn't matter that the brush is flat for now. Eventually, if you're gonna start copying from the tissue text, then then it's gonna get frustrating if you're trying to copy, and then trying to match the key eye and then you're gonna start frustrating because you don't have the right tools. At that point, you're gonna need the brush to be able to see how you compare to your model or your exemplar. But just to do lines and work on breath, yeah, it's fine. The way that you hold the brush actually is, so you have this part here, okay, where the gets thicker, and that's why the thicker the better. And when you put your hands, it's like you put your thumb, and then you wrap up your fingers, and the sensation is that you're trying to hold an egg inside your palm, right? So if you can maintain that grip like this, and then hold an egg inside the palm here, that's the right grip, because the shape of your hand is firm yet relaxed, right? Your fingers are not tense, but you're holding the brush like this, right? It's like all the fingers are involved. So it's not like this, right? Not a mop, right? So it's and then it's not like this either because it's not a pencil. Okay, so you hold it with all your fingers straight up, and then inside here you should have the sensation that I haven't, like I'm holding an egg on my hand, which you can actually try. Try to put an egg in your hand, raise that hand up, and try to write and hold that egg in there, and to maintain that shape, that grip. So that's why the thicker this part, the better, right? Because the better grip you have. So it just has a better sensation when you have this part nice and round. I'm thinking tomorrow I'm going to set up my camera to point out to my rug over here, and then to show like the setup on the floor. You know what I mean? Like how to set it up on the floor, and then how to do that. At least how to do the line, okay, the diagonal line, okay, because that's kind of like a good warm up, and then that would give you an idea of like how much space you need. But yeah, so that's the thing, that tomorrow I'll have it set up, and then we can go over the setup. But that's what I kind of want to go over, the material. So because I'm going to be using the felt, the paperweights, the ink. So if you got that, then you can use it as a mirror. Okay.